Picture this. You're standing in a room full of 300 wedding guests, wearing your maid of honor dress, when your own sister grabs the microphone during her reception and announces to everyone that you're pregnant. The crowd gasps, cameras flash, and for a split second, you think maybe she's trying to share your joy. Then she adds the words that will haunt you forever. But don't get too excited, everyone. She's lying about everything. The baby, the father, all of it. My sister has always been a pathological liar, and this is just her latest desperate attempt for attention. The silence that follows is deafening. 300 pairs of eyes turn to you, some filled with pity, others with disgust, most with uncomfortable curiosity. Your mother's face goes white, your father won't even look at you. And standing there in that beautiful ballroom in downtown Nashville, holding a bouquet of white roses that suddenly feel like they weigh 1,000 pounds, you realize that your entire world just crumbled in front of everyone you've ever known. This is the story of Cassandra Mitchell, and how one moment of public humiliation became the catalyst for discovering truths that ran far deeper than anyone could have imagined. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Cassandra Mitchell had always been the responsible one. At 24, while her older sister Victoria was busy planning her third engagement party in 5 years, Cassandra was working 60-hour weeks as a pediatric nurse at Vanderbilt Children's Hospital. She lived in a modest one-bedroom apartment in East Nashville, drove a 7-year-old Honda Civic that she'd bought with her own money, and had exactly $3,847 in her savings account. Every penny earned through double shifts and picking up extra weekend hours. The Mitchell family had a reputation to uphold in Belmead, one of Nashville's most prestigious neighborhoods. Their father, Richard Mitchell, owned a successful chain of medical supply companies across Tennessee and Kentucky. Their mother, Patricia, served on the boards of 3 different charities and hosted an annual garden party that made the society pages of Nashville Scene magazine. The family lived in a sprawling colonial mansion on 6 acres, complete with a tennis court and a pool house that was bigger than most people's actual homes. Victoria, at 27, had seamlessly slipped into the role of the perfect Southern belle. She'd graduated from Vanderbilt University with a degree in communications that she'd never used, instead spending her time planning elaborate social events and maintaining her Instagram presence of 47,000 followers. Her engagement to Brandon Whitfield, heir to a Memphis real estate empire, was being called the wedding of the season by Nashville's social elite. Cassandra had chosen a different path, much to her parents' quiet disappointment. While Victoria was pledging Chi Omega and attending debutante balls, Cassandra was studying for her nursing boards and working part-time at a free clinic in North Nashville. She turned down her parents' offer to pay for law school or business school, insisting instead on making her own way. "I want to help people," she told her father during one particularly tense family dinner. "Real help, not just writing checks to feel better about ourselves." The relationship between the sisters had always been complicated. Victoria was everything their parents wanted in a daughter: beautiful, charming, socially connected, and willing to play the game of Southern high society. She had their mother's platinum blonde hair and their father's sharp business instincts, though she preferred to use them for social climbing rather than actual work. Cassandra, with her natural auburn hair and her insistence on wearing scrubs more often than designer dresses, had always felt like an outsider in her own family. It wasn't that her parents didn't love her. They were proud of her nursing degree and her work at the hospital, in the way that wealthy people are proud of their children's noble career choices. But there was always an underlying current of disappointment, a sense that Cassandra was deliberately choosing to be difficult, to reject the advantages that their money and social position could provide. The tension had been building for months leading up to Victoria's wedding. Every family gathering seemed to include subtle digs about Cassandra's single status, her modest apartment, her reluctance to date the sons of their parents' country club friends. "You're 24, sweetheart," her mother would say with that particular smile that wasn't really a smile. "Don't you think it's time you started thinking about settling down? Victoria has shown you how it's done." But Cassandra had been focused on other things. Her work at the hospital was demanding and emotionally draining, but it was also deeply fulfilling. She'd recently been promoted to senior pediatric nurse on the NICU floor, which meant longer hours, but also more responsibility and better pay. She was finally starting to feel like she was building something real, something that belonged entirely to her. The pregnancy had been a complete shock. She'd been seeing Dr. James Morrison for about 4 months. He was a resident in the emergency department, 2 years older than her, with kind eyes and a quiet sense of humor that made their long shifts more bearable. It wasn't a grand romance. They both worked too much for grand gestures, but it was real and steady and comfortable. He brought her coffee on the nights she worked late, and she helped him study for his board exams. They talked about maybe moving in together once his residency was finished, maybe taking a real vacation somewhere that didn't have a hospital nearby. When she missed her period, her first thought was stress. The wedding preparations had been overwhelming, with Victoria demanding that every detail be perfect, and their mother orchestrating the event like a military campaign. Cassandra was working extra shifts to pay for her maid of honor dress and the bachelorette party weekend in Gatlinburg, plus all the other expenses that seemed to multiply every week. Stress could definitely cause missed periods. But when she missed the second one, she bought a pregnancy test from the CVS near her apartment, taking it at 6 a.m. before her shift started. She sat on her bathroom floor, still in her scrubs from the night before, staring at the 2 pink lines that would change everything.
Her first call was to James. He was in the middle of a 36-hour shift, but he found time to meet her in the hospital cafeteria during his break. They sat at a corner table, both still in their medical scrubs, whispering over lukewarm coffee and stale Danish pastries. "Are you sure?" he asked, his voice barely audible over the cafeteria noise. "I took 3 tests," Cassandra replied. "All positive, and I'm never late, ever." James ran his hands through his hair, a gesture she'd seen him make 100 times when he was processing difficult information. "Okay," he said finally. "Okay, what do you want to do?" It was the right question, and the fact that he asked it made her love him a little more. Not what should we do, not what are we going to do, but what do you want to do? Acknowledging that this was her body, her choice, her life that would change the most dramatically. "I want to keep it," she said, surprising herself with how quickly and certainly the words came out. "I know the timing is terrible, and we're not married, and my parents are going to absolutely lose their minds, but I want this baby." James reached across the table and took her hand. "Then that's what we'll do," he said. "We'll figure it out together." They decided to wait until after Victoria's wedding to tell their families. The wedding was only 3 weeks away, and Victoria had made it clear that nothing, absolutely nothing, was allowed to overshadow her big day. Cassandra figured she could manage to keep the secret for a few more weeks, and then they'd sit down with both sets of parents and work out how to move forward as a family. The morning sickness started the week before the wedding. Cassandra had always prided herself on having an iron stomach. You couldn't work in pediatrics without being able to handle all kinds of unpleasant bodily functions. But pregnancy nausea was something else entirely. She found herself rushing to the bathroom between patients, trying to time her breaks around the waves of queasiness that seemed to strike without warning. She managed to hide it from everyone except her coworker and best friend, Maya Patel, who noticed when Cassandra turned green during their lunch break and couldn't finish her sandwich. "Girl, you look like you're about to throw up all over this table," Maya said, pushing a glass of water toward her. "What's going on?" Maya had been Cassandra's closest friend since nursing school. She was the only person outside of James who knew about the pregnancy, and she'd been sworn to absolute secrecy until after the wedding. Maya understood the family dynamics. She'd met the Mitchells at enough hospital events to recognize the particular brand of pressure that came with Southern money and social expectations. "You need to tell them soon," Maya said as they walked back to the NICU floor. "You can't keep this secret much longer, and honestly, you shouldn't have to. This is good news, Cassie. You and James are going to be amazing parents." Cassandra knew Maya was right, but the timing felt impossible. Victoria's wedding was consuming every spare moment and every spare dollar. The final dress fitting, the rehearsal dinner, the last-minute details that somehow all required the maid of honor's immediate attention. Plus, she was working extra shifts to cover for a coworker who was out on medical leave, which meant she was pulling 12-hour days right up until the wedding weekend.
The night before the wedding, lying in her childhood bedroom in her parents' house, Victoria had insisted that all the wedding parties stay at the family home. Cassandra placed her hand on her still flat stomach and tried to imagine how different her life would be in 6 months. A baby? Her and James's baby. It was terrifying and wonderful and completely overwhelming. She had no idea that in less than 24 hours, everything she thought she knew about her family, her sister, and herself would be shattered in the most public and humiliating way possible. She had no idea that Victoria had been watching, listening, and planning something that would make Cassandra question everything she'd ever believed about the people who were supposed to love her most. As she drifted off to sleep that Friday night, her last conscious thought was about how she would tell her parents about the pregnancy after all the wedding excitement died down. She imagined sitting them down in the living room, maybe with James beside her, explaining how they were ready to be parents, even if the timing wasn't perfect. She had no idea that her sister had very different plans for how that announcement would be made.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story.
The morning of Victoria's wedding dawned perfect and cloudless, the kind of September day that made Nashville's humidity almost bearable. Cassandra woke up in her childhood bedroom at 5:30 a.m., not because of an alarm, but because her stomach was churning with morning sickness that seemed determined to make this day as difficult as possible. She made it to the bathroom just in time, gripping the cool marble countertop as waves of nausea rolled through her. This was getting worse, not better, and she had exactly 14 hours of wedding festivities to get through before she could collapse back into bed. She splashed cold water on her face and looked at herself in the mirror, pale, exhausted, with dark circles under her eyes that no amount of concealer was going to hide. "Cassie? You okay in there?" Maya's voice came through the door. She'd arrived the night before to help with final preparations, and Cassandra had never been more grateful for her best friend's presence. "Just peachy," Cassandra replied, opening the door. "Nothing like projectile vomiting to start the most important day in my sister's life." Maya handed her a sleeve of saltine crackers and a bottle of ginger ale. "I brought supplies, and I already talked to the caterer about keeping some bland food available for you during the reception. You need to eat something, even if it's just crackers." The Mitchell family home had been transformed into a wedding preparation headquarters. Hair and makeup artists had taken over the sunroom, florists were arranging massive displays in the foyer, and caterers were setting up stations in the backyard where the ceremony would take place. Patricia Mitchell was in full general mode, directing traffic with her iPad and her headset, making sure every detail aligned with the vision she and Victoria had been crafting for the past 18 months. "Cassandra, there you are," her mother said, spotting her in the kitchen. "The photographer wants to do some getting ready shots in about an hour. Please tell me you're going to do something about those dark circles. This is going to be in Victoria's wedding album forever." "Good morning to you too, Mom," Cassandra muttered, but Patricia was already on to the next crisis, something about the wrong shade of ribbon on the ceremony programs. Victoria was holding court in the master bedroom, surrounded by 3 bridesmaids, 2 hairstylists, and a makeup artist who looked like she'd been flown in from Los Angeles. She was in full bride mode, radiant, commanding, and completely in her element. This was what Victoria had been born for, Cassandra realized. Not the marriage itself, necessarily, but the wedding, the performance, the day when she would be the undisputed center of everyone's universe. "Finally," Victoria said when Cassandra appeared in the doorway. "I need you to call the florist and make sure they understand that the maid of honor bouquet needs to be smaller than mine. I saw the mock-up yesterday and it looked way too prominent." Cassandra bit back her first 3 responses and simply nodded. "I'll take care of it. And can you check on the gift table? I want to make sure Brandon's family gifts are displayed prominently. The Woodfields gave us that gorgeous crystal vase collection, and I want everyone to see it." The morning blurred together in a haze of last-minute tasks and carefully orchestrated photo opportunities. Cassandra found herself running errands, fielding phone calls, and managing crises that ranged from a missing boutonniere to a vendor who showed up at the wrong address. Through it all, she was fighting waves of nausea and trying to keep crackers in her stomach long enough to absorb some nutrients. James arrived at the house around noon, looking handsome in his navy suit and carrying a small gift bag. He was supposed to be Brandon's groomsman, though he barely knew the groom,
Victoria had insisted on including him after learning that he and Cassandra were dating. "We need even numbers for the wedding party," she explained, though Cassandra suspected Victoria just wanted to control every aspect of the day, including who her sister brought as a date. "How are you feeling?" James asked quietly, finding Cassandra in the kitchen during a brief lull in the chaos. "Like I might pass out during the ceremony," she admitted. "This morning sickness is no joke. How do women function during the first trimester?" "Some don't," James said practically. "That's why there's such a thing as morning sickness leave. You're pushing yourself too hard today." "I can't exactly bow out of my sister's wedding because I'm pregnant with a baby she doesn't know exists. I just need to get through the next few hours and then we can go home and I can sleep for 12 hours straight." James squeezed her hand. "After today, we tell our families. No more waiting. You shouldn't have to keep the secret anymore, and I want to start planning for our future together." The ceremony was set for 4 p.m. in the backyard, under a white silk canopy that had cost more than Cassandra's annual rent. 300 guests had been invited, representing the cream of Nashville society: politicians, business leaders, old money families, and new money entrepreneurs, who were all part of the social ecosystem that the Mitchells had spent decades cultivating. As the afternoon progressed, Cassandra noticed something odd about Victoria's behavior. Her sister kept watching her with a strange intensity, especially when Cassandra was talking to their relatives or family friends. During the pre-ceremony photos, Victoria insisted on several shots of just the two of them together, which was unusual since they'd never been particularly close. "Smile bigger, Cassie," Victoria said during one photo session. "This is supposed to be the happiest day ever. You look like you're at a funeral." "Sorry, I'm just tired," Cassandra replied, forcing her mouth into the required smile. "Tired from what? You're 24. When I was your age, I could party for 3 days straight and still look amazing." Victoria's laugh sounded strangely artificial, although I guess some people just handle stress differently.
There was something in her tone that made Cassandra look at her sister more carefully. Victoria was beautiful, there was no denying that. Her dress was a masterpiece of French lace and silk, her makeup was flawless, and her hair was arranged in an elegant updo that had taken 3 hours to perfect. But there was something in her eyes, something calculating and cold, that made Cassandra suddenly uncomfortable. The ceremony itself was picture perfect. Brandon looked appropriately smitten, Victoria glowed with bridal radiance, and the minister delivered a homily about love and commitment that brought tears to half the guests' eyes. Cassandra managed to get through her maid of honor duties without incident, though she had to grip her bouquet tightly to keep her hands from shaking during the vows. It was during the cocktail hour, while guests mingled in the garden and the wedding party took more photos, that Cassandra first noticed the whispers. Small groups of people talking in low voices, glancing in her direction, then quickly looking away when she noticed them watching. At first, she attributed it to normal wedding gossip. People always talked about the wedding parties, speculating about relationships and drama. But as the evening progressed, the whispers became more noticeable. Her great-aunt Margaret approached her with a concerned expression. "Cassandra, dear, are you feeling all right? You look a bit peaked." "Just tired from all the wedding preparations," Cassandra replied automatically. "Well, make sure you're taking care of yourself," Margaret said, patting her arm, "especially now, with everything you have going on." Everything she had going on? Cassandra wanted to ask what that meant, but Margaret had already moved away, leaving her with a growing sense of unease. James found her standing alone by the bar, nursing a ginger ale and trying to make sense of the strange undercurrents she was sensing. "People are acting weird," she told him. "I keep feeling like everyone's staring at me, whispering about something." "It's probably just normal wedding drama," James said, though he looked concerned. "Big family events always bring out strange behavior in people." The reception dinner went smoothly, with speeches from both fathers that hit all the expected notes about love, family, and bright futures. Brandon's best man told embarrassing college stories, and Victoria's college roommate shared sweet anecdotes about their friendship. Cassandra was scheduled to give the final speech as maid of honor, something she'd been dreading for weeks. But as dessert was being served and the DJ was setting up for dancing, Victoria suddenly stood up and walked over to the microphone.
This wasn't part of the schedule. The speeches were supposed to be finished. "Ladies and gentlemen," Victoria said, her voice carrying clearly through the reception hall, "I know we've already heard some wonderful toasts tonight, but I have a special announcement to make." Cassandra felt her stomach drop. Something was very, very wrong. Victoria's smile was too bright, too theatrical, and the way she was gripping the microphone suggested this wasn't a spontaneous moment of wedding joy. "As you know, my sister Cassandra has been the most amazing maid of honor. She's worked so hard to make this day perfect, even though she's been dealing with some very exciting news of her own." The room fell silent. Cassandra could feel 300 pairs of eyes turning toward her, and suddenly she couldn't breathe. She tried to catch Victoria's eye, to signal her to stop, but her sister was looking out at the crowd, not at her. "Cassandra is pregnant," Victoria announced, and the room erupted in gasps and surprise murmurs. "Isn't that wonderful? My little sister is going to be a mother." For one brief, surreal moment, Cassandra thought maybe this was Victoria's way of being supportive. Maybe she'd figured out the secret and decided to help her share the news in a public way. Maybe this was just Victoria's dramatic personality taking over, but with good intentions. Then Victoria's expression shifted, and Cassandra saw something in her sister's eyes that made her blood run cold. "But here's the thing, everyone," Victoria continued, her voice taking on a different tone. "Don't get too excited about congratulating her just yet." The room went completely silent. Cassandra could hear her own heartbeat in her ears. She tried to stand up, to say something, to stop what was happening, but her legs wouldn't cooperate. "She's lying," Victoria said clearly, looking directly at Cassandra for the first time. "About the pregnancy, about the father, about everything. My sister has always been a pathological liar, and this is just her latest desperate attempt to get attention on my wedding day." The silence that followed was absolute and devastating. Cassandra could see her mother's face go white with shock, could see her father's jaw clench with anger, could see James starting to rise from his seat with a look of pure fury. But most clearly, she could see Victoria, standing there in her perfect wedding dress, holding the microphone like a weapon, smiling that cold, calculating smile that revealed exactly who her sister really was under all the Southern Belle charm. And in that moment, Cassandra realized that everything she thought she knew about her family was about to change forever.
The silence stretched for what felt like an eternity, but was probably only 30 seconds. Cassandra sat frozen in her chair, the weight of 300 stares pressing down on her like a physical force. Her mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. Her brain couldn't process what had just happened. Her own sister, on her wedding day, had just destroyed her reputation in front of everyone they knew. Then the whispers started. Low, urgent conversations breaking out at tables around the reception hall. Cassandra caught fragments. "Did you know about this? How embarrassing for the family. I always thought there was something off about that girl. Poor Patricia and Richard." James was the first to move. He shot up from his chair so fast it toppled backward, his face flushed with an anger Cassandra had never seen from him before. "What the hell is wrong with you?" he shouted at Victoria, his voice carrying across the now buzzing reception hall. Victoria's smile didn't waver. If anything, it grew wider. "Oh, and here comes the supposed father," she said into the microphone. "Dr. James Morrison, everyone. The man my sister claims got her pregnant. Though I wonder if he even knows he's supposedly going to be a daddy." "Victoria, stop this right now," Patricia Mitchell's voice cut through the chaos as she stood up from the head table. Her face was pale but determined, the social hostess in her taking over despite the personal crisis. "This is neither the time nor the place for family discussions." "Actually, Mother, I think this is the perfect time," Victoria replied, still holding the microphone like a shield. "Our family has always been about truth and integrity, haven't we? And I can't stand here and let everyone celebrate a lie." Richard Mitchell rose slowly from his chair, his businessman's composure barely containing what Cassandra could see was volcanic rage.
Victoria Elizabeth Mitchell, he said in a voice that could have frozen the Tennessee River. You will put down that microphone and end this spectacle immediately. But Victoria wasn't finished. I found the pregnancy tests, she announced to the crowd. 3 of them, hidden in Cassandra's purse when she was getting ready this morning. All positive. But here's what's interesting. They were still in their packages, unopened, unused. Cassandra's world tilted sideways. She had bought those tests weeks ago, but hadn't needed to use them. The 3 she'd actually taken were long gone, thrown away at the hospital. The unopened ones were backup tests she'd forgotten about, still in her purse from her panicked trip to CVS. But Victoria had twisted the narrative, made it look like Cassandra was planning to fake a pregnancy announcement. She was going to pretend to take them, Victoria continued, her voice gaining momentum. Stage the whole thing, make everyone believe she was pregnant so she could... What, Cassie? Steal attention from my wedding? Force that poor doctor into a relationship? Get mom and dad to support you financially? That's not... Cassandra finally found her voice, but it came out as a croak. She tried again, louder. That's not... What happened? Victoria, you know that's not... Do I? Victoria's eyes were bright with something that looked like genuine conviction. Because honestly, Cassie, this is exactly the kind of thing you do. Remember when you told everyone at Thanksgiving that you were accepted to Johns Hopkins for medical school when you'd never even applied? Cassandra felt the ground disappearing beneath her feet. That had been a misunderstanding. She'd mentioned that Johns Hopkins had sent her recruitment materials, and somehow family members had misheard and thought she'd been accepted. She'd tried to correct it, but by then the story had taken on a life of its own. Victoria was twisting that old confusion into evidence of pathological lying. Maya appeared at Cassandra's side, her face fierce with protective anger. This is insane, she said, loud enough for nearby tables to hear. Cassie is pregnant. I was there when she took the first test. I've been helping her through morning sickness for weeks. Oh, Maya, Victoria said with mock sympathy. Sweet, loyal Maya, always willing to cover for Cassandra's stories. How much did she pay you to back her up on this one? The accusation hit Maya like a slap. Are you out of your mind? I'm a registered nurse, not some paid actress. I know what pregnancy looks like, and Cassandra is definitely... Enough! Richard's voice boomed across the reception hall, cutting through all other sound. Victoria, you will stop this immediately, or you will face consequences you are not prepared for. Cassandra, and you, Dr. Morrison, will come with your mother and me now. The rest of you, he addressed the crowd, will enjoy the remainder of the evening, and we will discuss none of this further. But the damage was done. As Cassandra stood on shaking legs, she could see the faces around her, some sympathetic, some judgmental, all intensely curious. The story would be all over Nashville society within hours. Her reputation, her credibility, her relationships with extended family and family friends, all of it was now suspect. James took her arm, his touch gentle despite the fury still radiating from him. Come on, he said quietly. Let's get out of here. They made their way toward the house, followed by Patricia and Richard, while behind them the reception slowly resumed its festivities. Victoria handed the microphone back to the DJ with a satisfied smile and returned to her new husband, who looked like he wasn't entirely sure what he'd just witnessed. The family meeting took place in Richard's study, a wood-paneled room lined with law books and business awards. Patricia closed the door firmly behind them, while Richard poured himself 3 fingers of bourbon without offering any to anyone else. Explain, he said simply, looking directly at Cassandra. I am pregnant, Cassandra said, her voice stronger now that she was away from the crowd. I'm about 8 weeks along. James is the father. I was planning to tell you and Mom after the wedding was over because I didn't want to overshadow Victoria's day. Then explain the unused pregnancy tests, Patricia Mitchell said, for social composure cracking slightly.
James stepped forward. Mrs. Mitchell, with respect, that doesn't prove anything. Cassandra took pregnancy tests weeks ago and confirmed the pregnancy. Having backup tests in her purse doesn't invalidate the original results. And you're certain you're the father? Richard asked bluntly. Dad, Cassandra gasped, but James answered calmly. Yes, sir. Cassandra and I have been in an exclusive relationship for 4 months. I'm absolutely certain.
Patricia sat down heavily in one of the leather chairs. "This is a disaster," she said quietly. "Do you have any idea what Victoria just did to our family's reputation? To your reputation, Cassandra?" "What Victoria did," Cassandra said, anger finally overtaking shock, "was cruel and calculated. She humiliated me in front of 300 people based on a misunderstanding about some unused tests. She accused me of being a pathological liar, brought up things from years ago, and suggested I was trying to steal attention on her wedding day. What kind of sister does that?" "The kind who's had to watch you manipulate situations for attention your entire life," Patricia replied automatically, then caught herself. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean—" "Yes, you did," Cassandra said quietly. "You meant exactly what you said. You think I'm manipulative. You think I make things up for attention, just like Victoria said." Richard set down his bourbon glass with a sharp clink. "This family discussion can wait. Right now we need to control the damage from tonight's incident. Cassandra, you and Dr. Morrison will provide medical documentation of this pregnancy by Monday morning. Blood work, ultrasound, doctor's confirmation, everything." "You want me to prove I'm pregnant?" Cassandra couldn't believe what she was hearing. "To my own parents?" "You want us to believe you after what just happened out there?" Richard countered. "Your sister presented evidence that suggested you were planning to fake a pregnancy. Now you need to provide evidence to the contrary." James' jaw tightened. "Mr. Mitchell, I understand you're upset, but demanding medical proof from your daughter is what any reasonable person would do under these circumstances," Richard cut him off. "My family's reputation is on the line. My business relationships are affected when my daughters become the subject of scandal and gossip. If Cassandra is pregnant, she'll prove it. If she's not, we'll deal with that situation accordingly." Cassandra stared at her father, seeing him clearly for perhaps the first time in her life. Not as the successful businessman who provided for his family, not as the pillar of the community who donated to charities and sat on hospital boards, but as a man who valued reputation over family, control over compassion. "Fine. I'll get you your proof. Blood work, ultrasound, DNA test if you want it. Whatever it takes to prove that your daughter isn't the liar you apparently think she is." "Cassandra," Patricia started, but Cassandra held her hand. "No, Mom. I get it now. Victoria didn't just decide to humiliate me tonight on her own. She knew exactly how you'd react. She knew you'd demand proof, knew I assume I was lying, and knew you'd prioritize protecting the family reputation over protecting me." She stood up, James rising beside her. "We'll get you your medical documentation, and when we do, when you have absolute proof that I was telling the truth, I want you to remember this moment. I want you to remember that when your daughter needed you to believe in her, to defend her, to trust her, you chose to side with the one who publicly humiliated her instead." As they walked toward the door, Patricia called after them. "Where are you going? You can't just leave in the middle of Victoria's reception." Cassandra turned back, looking at her parents, her father rigid with controlled anger, her mother worried about appearances above all else. "Victoria's reception is the last place I should be right now, unless you want to risk me stealing more attention from the bride." They left the study and walked through the house, past caterers cleaning up in the kitchen, past relatives who looked away awkwardly when they saw them coming. Outside, the reception was still going strong, with music and laughter carrying across the manicured lawn. James drove them back to Cassandra's apartment in silence, both of them processing what had just happened. It wasn't until they were inside, away from the Mitchell family mansion and all its complicated loyalties, that Cassandra finally broke down. "She planned this," she sobbed into James's shoulder. "Victoria planned this whole thing. She went through my purse, found those tests, and then twisted everything to make me look like a liar. And my parents believed her immediately." "We're going to prove them wrong," James said firmly, stroking her hair. "We're going to get the medical documentation, and then they're going to have to face what they did tonight." Cassandra pulled back to look at him, wiping tears from her face. "What if proving I'm pregnant isn't enough? What if they still don't believe the baby is yours? What if they demand DNA tests? What if this ruins your residency, your career?" James cupped his face in his hands. "Then we'll deal with that too. Together. But Cassie, listen to me. We are not going to let your sister destroy us. We're going to fight back." As she looked into his eyes, Cassandra felt something shift inside her. The hurt and humiliation were still there, but under them was growing something stronger: determination. Victoria thought she could destroy her with lies and manipulation. Her parents thought they could control her with demands for proof and threats to their reputation. They were all about to learn exactly how wrong they were.
Monday morning arrived gray and drizzling, matching Cassandra's mood perfectly. She'd barely slept since Saturday night, her mind replaying Victoria's accusations and her parents' cold demand for proof. Every time she closed her eyes, she could see that reception hall full of shocked faces, could hear the whispers that would follow her family for months to come. James picked her up at 7 a.m. for their first stop, Dr. Sarah Chen's obstetrics practice in Green Hills. Dr. Chen had been recommended by James's attending physician as someone who was both thorough and discreet, essential qualities given the scrutiny they were now under. "I've never had to prove I was pregnant before," Cassandra said as they sat in the waiting room surrounded by glowing expectant mothers reading parenting magazines. "This feels surreal." "We're not just proving you're pregnant," James reminded her quietly. "We're establishing a complete medical record that no one can question. Blood work, ultrasound, dating scans, everything your father could possibly want to see." Dr. Chen was a small, efficient woman in her 50s who listened to their story without judgment, though her eyebrows did rise slightly when they explained why they needed such comprehensive documentation. "Family disputes over pregnancy are more common than you'd think," she said professionally. "We'll do a complete workup. Blood tests for pregnancy hormones, genetic screening, and an ultrasound to establish fetal development and due date. Everything will be documented with timestamps and my official signature." The blood draw was routine, but the ultrasound was emotional in a way Cassandra hadn't expected. Seeing the tiny form on the screen, barely 2 inches long but unmistakably human, made everything real in a way that positive pregnancy tests couldn't match. "There's your baby," Dr. Chen said, pointing to the fluttering movement on the monitor. "Strong heartbeat, good development, measuring consistent with about 8.5 weeks gestation. Based on fetal size, I'd estimate conception occurred around the 3rd week of July." James squeezed Cassandra's hand as they both stared at the screen. For a moment, the drama with Victoria and her parents faded away, replaced by pure wonder at the tiny life they'd created together. "Can we get extra copies of everything?" Cassandra asked. "Photos, reports, all of it?" "Of course. I'll have complete documentation ready by this afternoon, including my professional assessment and certification of the pregnancy." By the time they left Dr. Chen's office, Cassandra felt like she had an arsenal of evidence. But as they drove toward Vanderbilt Hospital for James to start his shift, the reality of what came next began to sink in. "My phone has been blowing up all morning," she told James, scrolling through text messages she'd been afraid to read. "Cousins, family friends, people from church, everyone wants to know what really happened at the wedding." Most of the messages were sympathetic, but several were clearly fishing for gossip. Her cousin Jennifer had texted, "OMG, what was Victoria thinking? Call me ASAP." While her mother's book club friend had sent a more ominous message. "So sorry about the confusion at the wedding, dear. Hope everything works out for the best." The confusion. As if Victoria's calculated attack was just a simple misunderstanding. "You don't have to respond to any of them right now," James said. "Focus on getting through today first." But Cassandra's phone rang before she could put it away. Maya's name flashed on the screen. "Thank God," Maya said when Cassandra answered. "I've been worried sick about you. How are you holding up?" "I've been better. We just got back from the doctor. Got all the proof my parents want that I'm actually pregnant." "I still can't believe they're making you prove it. What kind of family doesn't believe their own daughter?" Maya's voice was sharp with anger. "In Victoria? I've known her for 3 years, and I never saw that level of cruelty coming." "There's something else," Cassandra said. "I need you to ask you a favor, and you're going to think I'm paranoid. But I need you to write down everything you remember about my pregnancy. When I first told you, what symptoms you observed, conversations we had, all of it." "Why? Do you think someone's going to question whether I'm telling the truth too?" "I don't know what to think anymore. But if Victoria was willing to ambush me at her own wedding, I don't know what else she might try. I want documentation of everything from everyone who can verify my story." Maya was quiet for a moment. "Cassie, there's something you should know. I got a call yesterday from someone claiming to be doing research for a family lawyer. They were asking about your pregnancy, whether I'd actually seen you take tests, whether you'd seemed genuinely sick, or if it could have been fake." Cassandra felt ice in her veins. "Someone hired a private investigator? I don't know.
The caller wouldn't give details, just said they were gathering information about recent family disputes. I told them to go to hell, but what? Cassie, they knew things, specific things about your work schedule, about James, about conversations you and I had in private. Someone has been watching you, collecting information.
After hanging up with Maya, Cassandra sat in her car outside the hospital, trying to process this new information. It was one thing for Victoria to have gone through her purse and found unused pregnancy tests. It was another thing entirely for someone to be conducting an investigation into her personal life. She called her parents' house, expecting to leave a message, but Patricia answered on the second ring. "Cassandra, do you have the medical documentation your father requested?" "Mom, did your dad hire someone to investigate me?" The pause on the other end of the line was telling. "I don't know what you mean." "Someone called Maya yesterday asking questions about my pregnancy. Someone who knew details about my personal life that only family would know." "Cassandra, I think you're being paranoid. Your father asked for medical proof, not a private investigation." "Then why won't you answer my question directly? Did you hire someone or not?" Another pause. "Your father is taking steps to protect the family's reputation. If that includes verifying information that was publicly disputed, then yes, he's doing his due diligence." Cassandra closed her eyes, feeling the last vestiges of her childhood trust and her parents crumble away. "You did hire someone. You're having me investigated like I'm some kind of criminal." "You put us in an impossible position," Patricia said defensively. "Do you have any idea what people are saying? The phone hasn't stopped ringing since Saturday night. Your father's business partners are asking questions. The country club is buzzing with gossip. We had to do something." "You had to do something? How about believing your daughter? How about defending me instead of hiring strangers to spy on me?" "Bring us the medical documentation this afternoon," Patricia said, her voice turning cold. 4 o'clock. "And Cassandra, come alone. We don't need Dr. Morrison making this situation more complicated than it already is." The line went dead, leaving Cassandra staring at her phone in disbelief. She spent the rest of the morning at work, trying to focus on her patients, but finding her mind constantly wandering. Her colleagues had heard about the wedding incident. News traveled fast in Nashville's medical community. But most were supportive. Several nurses approached her privately to offer encouragement and share their own stories of family drama. But she also noticed some pointed silence from a few people, quick conversations that stopped when she entered rooms, the kind of workplace awkwardness that suggested not everyone believed her side of the story. During her lunch break, she drove back to Dr. Chen's office to collect the documentation. The medical records were comprehensive. Blood work showing elevated pregnancy hormones consistent with 8 weeks gestation, ultrasound images with measurements and dating information, and Dr. Chen's official report certifying the pregnancy and estimated conception date. Looking at the stack of papers, Cassandra felt a mixture of vindication and sadness. This should have been a joyful time, sharing pregnancy news with family, planning for the future, celebrating the new life she and James were creating. Instead, she was treating medical appointments like evidence-gathering missions and preparing to present proof of her pregnancy like a defendant in court. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Saw the drama at the wedding. Victoria's always been jealous of you. Don't let them break you down. A friend." She stared at the message, wondering who had sent it and what they meant about Victoria being jealous. Jealous of what? Cassandra was the one working 60-hour weeks while Victoria lived in luxury. Cassandra was the one fighting for independence while Victoria enjoyed their parents' full financial support. But as she thought about it more, she began to remember small incidents over the years. Victoria's sharp comments whenever Cassandra received recognition at work, the way she dismissed Cassandra's nursing degree as playing with sick children while expecting everyone to celebrate her communications degree. The subtle put-downs disguised as sisterly concern. Maybe there had been jealousy. Maybe Victoria resented that Cassandra had chosen a career that actually helped people, that she'd found love with someone who respected her independence, that she was building a life that didn't depend on their parents' money and social connections. Maybe Victoria's wedding day attack wasn't just cruel. Maybe it was strategic, a way to destroy Cassandra's credibility and reputation while positioning herself as the trustworthy daughter, the one their parents could rely on to uphold family values.
As Cassandra drove towards her parents' house for the 4 p.m. meeting, she realized that getting her family to believe she was pregnant was only the beginning. Victoria had declared war, and Cassandra was just starting to understand the full scope of the battlefield. The medical documentation in her purse felt like armor, but she was beginning to suspect she was going to need much more than proof of pregnancy to win this fight. She was going to need to expose the truth about Victoria, about her parents' priorities, and about the toxic dynamics that had been poisoning her family for years. The question was whether she was strong enough to see it through, and whether proving her pregnancy would be worth the cost of losing her family forever.
Cassandra sat in her Honda Civic outside her parents' Belmead mansion at 3:55 p.m., staring at the imposing colonial facade that had once represented safety and belonging. Now it felt like enemy territory. The manila envelope containing Dr. Chen's medical documentation sat on her passenger seat like a weapon she wasn't sure she was ready to use. Her phone buzzed with a text from James. "You don't have to do this alone. I can still come with you." She typed back. "They specifically said to come alone. I need to handle this myself." But her hands were shaking as she sent the message. Taking a deep breath, she grabbed the envelope and walked up the familiar brick pathway. Before she could even ring the doorbell, Patricia opened the front door, her face carefully composed in what Cassandra had learned to recognize as her mother's difficult conversation expression. "You're right on time," Patricia said, stepping aside to let her in. "Your father is waiting in his study." The house felt different somehow. Colder, more formal. Cassandra realized that for the first time in her life, she was entering her childhood home as an outsider, someone whose motives were suspect and whose word couldn't be trusted. Richard was standing behind his mahogany desk when she entered the study, still wearing his business suit despite it being a Monday afternoon. He looked like he was preparing for a board meeting rather than a conversation with his daughter. "Do you have the documentation?" he asked without preamble. Cassandra set the manila envelope on his desk. Complete medical records from Dr. Sarah Chen, one of Nashville's most respected obstetricians, blood work showing pregnancy hormones consistent with 8.5 weeks gestation, ultrasound images with measurements confirming fetal development, official medical certification of the pregnancy with estimated conception date. Richard opened the envelope and began reviewing the documents methodically, his reading glasses perched on his nose. Patricia hovered nearby, occasionally peering over his shoulder at the ultrasound images. "The conception date listed here," Richard said, after several minutes, "July 20th, give or take a few days. That would be about 4 months into my relationship with James. We were exclusive. He's the father." "According to this, you're due in early April," Patricia said, studying the ultrasound photos. That's going to be difficult timing with your work schedule." For a moment, Cassandra heard something almost like maternal concern in her mother's voice, and she felt a flicker of hope. Maybe this was the beginning of healing, of her parents accepting the reality and supporting her through it. Then Richard set down the documents and fixed her with his steely business stare. "This proves you're pregnant. It doesn't prove you weren't planning to fake a pregnancy announcement using those unused tests Victoria found." Cassandra felt like she'd been slapped. "Are you serious right now? I just gave you ironclad medical proof that I'm pregnant, and you're still questioning my honesty?" "I'm questioning your judgment," Richard replied, "and your timing, and your motivations for keeping this secret until Victoria's wedding weekend. I kept it secret because I knew exactly how you'd react. I knew you'd make it about the family reputation instead of celebrating that you're going to be grandparents." "Don't raise your voice to your father," Patricia said automatically, but there was less conviction in it than usual. Richard picked up a separate folder from his desk, one that hadn't been there when Cassandra arrived. "Since we're discussing honesty and motivations, let's talk about what our investigator discovered." "Your investigator?" Cassandra couldn't hide her disgust. "You actually hired someone to spy on me?" "I hired someone to verify information," Richard corrected. "And what he found was interesting." He opened the folder and pulled out several photographs.
Cassandra's stomach dropped when she saw what they were. Pictures of her and James at various locations around Nashville over the past few weeks, leaving her apartment building, having lunch at a cafe near the hospital, walking into Dr. Chen's office that very morning. "These pictures show you exhibiting clear signs of pregnancy," Richards said, pointing to images where her hand was unconsciously resting on her still flat stomach, where she was holding a ginger ale instead of coffee, where James was solicitously helping her out of his car. "Body language doesn't lie, Cassandra. These pictures were taken over the past 3 weeks, and they tell a story of a woman who is genuinely pregnant and genuinely being cared for by a concerned partner." Cassandra stared at the photos, confused. "I don't understand. Are you saying you believe me now?"
"I'm saying the evidence supports your claim," Richard said carefully. "Both the medical documentation and the surveillance photos confirm that you are pregnant and that Dr. Morrison is behaving like an expectant father." Patricia sat down heavily in one of the leather chairs. "So Victoria was wrong?" she said quietly. "Victoria was more than wrong," Cassandra said, anger flooding back. "Victoria deliberately humiliated me in front of 300 people based on a complete misunderstanding of some backup pregnancy tests. She accused me of being a pathological liar, brought up incidents from years ago, and suggested I was trying to steal attention from her wedding day. Wrong doesn't begin to cover what she did." Richard closed the folder and removed his reading glasses. For the first time since Cassandra had arrived, he looked less like a businessman and more like a father wrestling with a difficult situation. "Your sister called this morning," he said finally. "She wanted to know if we'd received your medical proof yet." "And?" "I told her we were reviewing documentation. She seemed pleased that we were taking her concerns seriously." Cassandra felt something cold settle in her chest. "She seemed pleased that you were investigating me?" "She said she was glad we were finally holding you accountable for your behavior," Patricia admitted reluctantly. "She mentioned several other incidents over the years where she felt you'd been, creative with the truth." "Such as?" Richard consulted another paper from his desk. "The Johns Hopkins medical school acceptance that never happened. The time you claimed to have saved a child's life in the ER, when the medical records show you were assisting, not leading the resuscitation. The boyfriend in college who supposedly proposed, but whom none of us ever met." Cassandra listened to this recitation of her supposed lies with growing amazement. "Dad, the Johns Hopkins thing was a misunderstanding that I tried to correct. The ER situation. I never claimed to lead anything. I said I helped save a child's life, which is exactly what assisting in a successful resuscitation means. And the college boyfriend never proposed. I said he was thinking about it, which he told me he was, even though it didn't work out. But you can see how these incidents create a pattern," Patricia said. "How Victoria might have genuinely believed you were fabricating the pregnancy?" "No, Mom, I can't see that, because what I see is a pattern of Victoria twisting my words and reinterpreting situations to make me look bad. And apparently, you and Dad have been believing her version of events for years." The room fell silent, except for the ticking of Richard's antique clock. Cassandra looked at her parents, really looked at them, and saw something she'd never noticed before. They were afraid. Not of her, but of scandal, of gossip, of anything that might threaten their carefully constructed social position. "There's something else," Richard said, his voice quieter now. "The investigator didn't just take surveillance photos. He also interviewed several people who know you. Colleagues from the hospital, friends. Maya, of course, though she was uncooperative. And everyone he spoke to confirmed that you've been showing signs of pregnancy for weeks. Your supervisor mentioned that you'd been taking more bathroom breaks and had requested schedule changes to avoid early morning shifts. The cafeteria staff said you'd stopped ordering coffee and switched to ginger ale. Your friend Maya provided a detailed timeline of symptoms and conversations about the pregnancy dating back to late August." Patricia was staring at the ultrasound photos again. "This is our grandchild,"
she said suddenly, as if the reality was just hitting her. Yes, this is your grandchild, who you'll meet in about 7 months, assuming Victoria doesn't convince you that the birth is fake, too. That's not fair, Richard said, but there was no heat in it. Isn't it? You hired a private investigator to prove your own daughter was lying about being pregnant. You demanded medical documentation like I was a fraud, trying to scam insurance money. You believed Victoria's accusations immediately and questioned my honesty based on misinterpretations of events from years ago. What part of that seems fair to you? Richard and Patricia exchanged a look that Cassandra couldn't quite interpret. We owe you an apology, Patricia said finally. Several apologies, actually. We also owe Victoria a serious conversation, Richard added grimly. What she did at the wedding was unacceptable, regardless of her motivations. Cassandra felt a surge of vindication, but it was tinged with sadness. It shouldn't have taken a private investigator and medical documentation for you to believe me. It should have been enough that I'm your daughter and I told you the truth. You're right, Richard said simply. It should have been. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of damaged trust settling over all of them. So where do we go from here? Patricia asked. Cassandra looked at the medical documents spread across her father's desk, at the surveillance photos that proved her honesty, and at her parents, who looked older and more uncertain than she'd ever seen them before. I don't know, she said honestly. I need time to think about whether I can forgive what happened this weekend, and you need to decide whether you're going to stand up to Victoria when she finds out you believe me now. What do you mean? Patricia asked. I mean, Victoria isn't going to be happy that her attack on me backfired. She's going to double down, try to find new ways to discredit me, maybe even target James. Are you prepared to defend us, or are you going to let her tear this family apart even further? Richard picked up the ultrasound photo showing their grandchild's tiny form and said, We're prepared to do whatever it takes to protect our family. All of our family. It wasn't quite the unconditional support Cassandra had hoped for, but it was a start. As she left her parents' house that afternoon, she realized that proving her pregnancy was indeed just the beginning. The real challenge would be rebuilding trust with her parents while preparing for whatever Victoria planned to do next. Because one thing was certain, Victoria wouldn't give up easily, and Cassandra was about to learn just how far her sister was willing to go to win this war.
Tuesday morning brought an unexpected call that shattered any hope Cassandra had for a peaceful resolution. She was in the middle of checking medication dosages for her NICU patients when her phone rang with Victoria's name on the display. Against her better judgment, she stepped into an empty conference room to take the call. Congratulations! Victoria's voice was honey-sweet with an undertone of venom. I hear you managed to convince Mom and Dad that you're actually pregnant. Victoria, I didn't convince them of anything. I provided medical proof because that's what they demanded after your public attack on Saturday. Medical proof. Victoria laughed, but there was no humor in it. Do you know how easy it is to fake medical records these days, especially when you're sleeping with a doctor who has access to hospital systems? Cassandra felt her blood pressure spike. Are you seriously suggesting that James falsified medical records? I'm suggesting that desperate people do desperate things, and you, little sister, have always been very good at manipulating situations to get what you want. What I want is for my family to stop treating me like a criminal and start acting like they actually care about me. What you want, Victoria said, her voice turning ice cold, is to destroy my marriage before it even starts. You couldn't stand that I was having the perfect wedding, the perfect life, so you decided to create a crisis that would overshadow everything. Cassandra was momentarily speechless. You think I got pregnant to ruin your wedding? I think you announced your pregnancy at my wedding reception to ruin my wedding. The timing is awfully convenient, don't you think? I didn't announce anything. You announced it, remember? You grabbed the microphone and told 300 people I was pregnant, then called me a liar in the same breath.
Because I was trying to protect our family from another one of your attention-seeking schemes, Victoria shot back. But apparently, you've convinced Mom and Dad that James helped you create fake medical records to support your story. Victoria, listen to yourself. You're accusing me of faking a pregnancy, falsifying medical records, and conspiring with my boyfriend to deceive our parents? Do you realize how insane that sounds? What sounds insane is you getting pregnant with some random doctor you've known for 4 months and then expecting everyone to celebrate. James isn't some random doctor. We've been together for 4 months, we're in love, and we're ready to be parents together. I'm sorry if that threatens you somehow, but... Threatens me? Victoria's laugh was sharp and bitter. Cassie, I just married Brandon Whitfield. I'm living in a $6 million mansion in Green Hills. I have everything I've ever wanted. Your little pregnancy drama doesn't threaten me. It embarrasses me. The call ended abruptly, leaving Cassandra staring at her phone and trying to process what had just happened. Victoria wasn't just angry about being proven wrong. She was doubling down on her accusations and now involving James directly. When Cassandra told James about the call during their lunch break, his reaction was immediate and furious. She's accusing me of falsifying medical records? Does she have any idea what that could do to my career, to my medical license? Keep your voice down, Cassandra said urgently, looking around at the curious faces now turned their direction. The last thing we need is hospital gossip about this. But it was too late. Dr. Williams, the chief of emergency medicine and James's supervising attending, approached their table with a concerned expression. Dr. Morrison, Miss Mitchell, could I speak with you both privately? They followed him to his office where he closed the door and gestured for them to sit. I've been hearing some concerning rumors, something about falsified medical records and questionable pregnancy documentation. I need to know if there's any truth to these allegations. James's face went white. Sir, I have never falsified any medical records. Ever. Cassandra's pregnancy was confirmed by Dr. Sarah Chen, who has no connection to this hospital or to me personally. Then why are people suggesting otherwise? Cassandra realized they had no choice but to explain the entire situation. Victoria's wedding day attack, her parents' demands for proof, and now Victoria's escalating accusations. Dr. Williams listened without interruption, his expression growing more serious with each detail. This is extremely problematic, he said when they finished. Dr. Morrison, even false accusations of medical fraud can destroy a career. If these rumors continue to spread, I'll have no choice but to launch a formal investigation. What can we do? Cassandra asked. Document everything. Every conversation, every accusation, every piece of evidence. And consider getting legal counsel, because this situation is escalating beyond a family dispute. That afternoon, Cassandra received a call from Maya that made everything worse. Someone's been calling the hospital administration, Maya said urgently. They're asking questions about your work performance, whether you've seemed unstable lately, whether there have been any concerns about your mental health. What kind of questions? Specific ones, like whether you've been calling in sick more often, whether you've been emotional or erratic with patients, whether anyone has observed you behaving strangely. They're building a case that you're having some kind of breakdown. Cassandra felt her walls closing in on her. Who's calling? They won't identify themselves, but the questions are too targeted to be random. Someone is actively trying to damage your professional reputation. When Cassandra got home that evening, she found James pacing in her living room with his laptop open, surrounded by printed documents and legal papers. I've been researching defamation law, he said without preamble. What Victoria did at the wedding and what she's doing now could constitute both slander and intentional infliction of emotional distress. You think we should sue my sister? I think we should be prepared to sue your sister if she doesn't stop. But first, we need to understand what we're really dealing with.
He handed her a printout of Victoria's Instagram account. Look at this. Cassandra scrolled through the posts from the past few days. On the surface, they seemed innocent. Honeymoon photos with Brandon, thank you messages for wedding gifts, glowing reviews of their wedding vendors. But embedded in the captions were subtle digs that painted a very different picture. So grateful for family who support us through everything, even unexpected drama, one caption read. Brandon has been so understanding about family situations that are beyond our control, read another. She's not mentioning you directly, James pointed out, but anyone who was at the wedding will know exactly what she's referring to. She's controlling the narrative, making herself look like the victim of your drama. Cassandra kept scrolling and found something that made her stomach drop. A photo of Victoria and their parents at what looked like a family dinner, posted just hours earlier. The caption read, "So blessed to have parents who always seek the truth, no matter how difficult the conversations might be. Family loyalty means holding each other accountable. #family first, #truth, #blessed. She's still meeting with our parents, Cassandra said. She's still trying to convince them that I'm lying, even after they saw the medical proof. James looked over her shoulder at the post. The comments are interesting too. Cassandra read through them and felt sick. Dozens of family friends and society acquaintances were commenting with support for Victoria, many with pointing references to standing by family during difficult times and hoping everything works out for the best. They're all talking about me, she realized. The whole Nashville social scene is discussing whether I'm a liar or mentally unstable or both. Her phone rang again, this time with her mother's number. Cassandra, we need to talk, Patricia said without preamble. Victoria came over for dinner tonight with some very serious concerns. What kind of concerns? She's found a doctor who says it's medically possible to fake the kind of documentation you provided, someone who specializes in fertility fraud cases. I need to talk to you. Cassandra felt like the floor had dropped out from under her. Mom, you've seen the medical records. You hired a private investigator who confirmed I was showing pregnancy symptoms for weeks. What more proof do you need? Victoria says that with James's help, you could have been faking symptoms for weeks, taking hormones to trigger pregnancy tests, learning to mimic morning sickness, even manipulating ultrasound images. You can't fake an ultrasound, Mom. The baby moves, there's a heartbeat. She says modern technology makes it possible to create very convincing fake medical footage. Cassandra was quiet for a long moment, processing the fact that her sister was now accusing her of an elaborate, months-long medical fraud conspiracy. Mom, do you believe her? The pause that followed was devastating. I don't know what to believe anymore, Patricia admitted. I want to believe you, Cassandra, but Victoria has been very thorough in her research. She's found expert opinions, medical studies, case reports of similar situations. Of course she has. Because she's not concerned with finding the truth, she's concerned with winning. She's turned this into a war, and she's willing to destroy my reputation, my career, and my relationship to win it. That's a very serious accusation. It's a very serious situation. Victoria has gone from publicly humiliating me to accusing James of medical fraud to convincing you that I'm capable of elaborate deception involving fake pregnancy symptoms and forged medical records? When does it end? When we know the truth, Patricia said firmly. You know the truth. You've seen the proof. But Victoria keeps moving the goalposts, and you keep letting her. After hanging up, Cassandra sat in the darkened living room, feeling more alone than she'd ever felt in her life. James was at the hospital pulling a double shift, Maya was working nights this week, and her family was being systematically turned against her by someone who was supposed to love her. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Don't let them break you. Some of us see what's really happening. Keep fighting. It was the second anonymous message of support she'd received, and she found herself wondering who was sending them. Someone was watching the situation unfold and believed in her innocence, but they weren't willing to step forward publicly. As she prepared for bed, Cassandra realized that Victoria's latest strategy was actually more dangerous than the original wedding day attack. Public humiliation was terrible, but it was a one-time event that people would eventually forget.
What Victoria was doing now was systematic character assassination, building a case for long-term doubts about Cassandra's mental stability and trustworthiness. And the most terrifying part was that it was working. Her parents were wavering despite clear evidence, hospital administration was asking questions about her mental health, and James's career was being threatened by accusations of fraud. Victoria wasn't just trying to win their current battle. She was trying to destroy Cassandra's entire life. And she was doing it with the methodical precision of someone who had been planning this attack for a long time. Tomorrow, Cassandra decided, she was going to start fighting back with the same strategic thinking. Because if Victoria wanted to play this game with no rules, then Cassandra was going to have to learn to play it too.
The crisis came on a Thursday morning that started like any other. Cassandra was preparing medication for a premature infant in the NICU when her supervisor, Helen Rodriguez, approached with an expression that made Cassandra's stomach drop. "Cassandra, I need you to come with me to HR immediately," Helen said quietly. "Bring your personal belongings." The walk down the hospital corridor felt like a death march. Other nurses and staff members looked away as she passed, their silence more damning than any whispered gossip could have been. In the HR office, she found 3 people waiting: the HR director, a hospital administrator she didn't recognize, and a woman in a dark suit who introduced herself as the hospital's legal counsel. "Ms. Mitchell," the HR director began, "we've received several serious allegations regarding your recent behavior and mental state. We're placing you on administrative leave pending a full investigation." "What allegations?" Cassandra's voice came out smaller than she intended. The legal counsel consulted her notes. "Reports of erratic behavior, emotional instability, possible substance abuse to explain recent physical symptoms, and concerns about your ability to safely care for vulnerable patients." "Substance abuse?" Cassandra couldn't hide her shock. "I'm pregnant. I don't drink. I don't use drugs." "That's another area of concern," the administrator interrupted. "Multiple sources have suggested that your claimed pregnancy may be fabricated, possibly as part of a broader pattern of delusional thinking." Cassandra felt the room spinning around her. "Multiple sources? Who is making these accusations?" "We can't reveal that information during an ongoing investigation," the HR director said, "but I can tell you that these reports have come from both inside and outside the hospital community." "This is insane! I have medical documentation proving my pregnancy. I can provide additional tests, speak with my doctor." "We'll certainly consider any evidence you want to provide," the legal counsel said. "But right now, our primary concern is patient safety. Until we can determine whether these allegations have merit, you cannot continue working in a patient care capacity." Cassandra was escorted out of the hospital like a criminal, her access badge deactivated, her personal items packed in a cardboard box. The humiliation was complete when she ran into Dr. Williams in the parking lot, his face grim with disappointment. "Cassandra, I'm sorry it's come to this. I tried to argue against the suspension, but the allegations were too serious to ignore." "Dr. Williams, you know me. You know I would never put patients at risk. This is all because of my sister's vendetta." "I know you believe that," he said carefully, "but some of the reports are coming from your own colleagues, people who work closely with you and are genuinely concerned." The drive home was a blur of tears and disbelief. When she arrived at her apartment, she found James waiting on her doorstep, his face pale, and his residency badge nowhere to be seen. They suspended you too," she said, not really asking. "Pending investigation into allegations of medical fraud and unprofessional conduct. Apparently, someone provided very detailed information about our relationship, suggesting that I've been helping you fabricate medical evidence." They sat in her living room, both of them struggling to process how quickly their lives had collapsed. "It has to be Victoria," Cassandra said. "She's the only one with enough motivation to orchestrate something this comprehensive." "But how? Some of these accusations are coming from people who've never met Victoria. Your coworkers, hospital administration, even patients' families." Cassandra's phone rang before she could answer.
Maya's name appeared on the screen, and she answered, hoping for some support from her best friend. "Cassie, oh my God, I just heard," Maya said, but her voice sounded strange, distant. "I can't believe this is happening. Maya, you know these allegations are false. You know I'm really pregnant. You know I'm not unstable. I want to support you, Cassie. I really do. But some people have been asking me questions, and they know things about our conversations that make me wonder if maybe you've been going through something I didn't recognize. I mean, this whole situation with Victoria, the family drama, the stress of the pregnancy, maybe it's affected you more than either of us realized." Cassandra felt her last lifeline slipping away. "Maya, are you seriously suggesting that I'm having some kind of breakdown?" "I'm suggesting that maybe you need professional help. Maybe we all missed the signs because we love you and wanted to believe everything was okay." The call ended with Maya promising to be there for Cassandra, but making it clear that she could no longer vouch for her mental stability. Another ally lost, another relationship poisoned by Victoria's campaign. That afternoon brought the worst blow yet. Patricia called with news that made Cassandra question everything she thought she knew about her family. "Victoria has hired a private investigator, a different one from the one your father used. This investigator specializes in medical fraud cases." "Of course she has." "Cassandra, they've found some very troubling information. Records showing that you've been researching pregnancy symptoms online for months before you claim to have conceived. Internet searches for how to fake morning sickness and hormone supplements to trigger positive pregnancy tests." Cassandra's blood ran cold. She had researched pregnancy symptoms, but only after she found out she was pregnant and wanted to understand what to expect. The searches had been innocent preparation for motherhood, not research for an elaborate deception. "Mom, you can check the dates on those searches. They were after I found out I was pregnant, not before." The investigator says it's easy to manipulate internet search histories to change dates. "So now I'm a computer hacker too, along with being a pathological liar, a medical fraud conspirator, and mentally unstable?" "There's more," Patricia continued, her voice strained. "They found evidence that you've been purchasing hormone supplements from online pharmacies, supplements that could trigger false positive pregnancy tests." "That's impossible! I've never purchased anything like that." The credit card records show purchases from 3 different online pharmaceutical companies over the past 6 months. Cassandra sat down hard, her mind racing. "Someone is using my credit card information. This is identity theft, fraud." "Or it's evidence of a very elaborate deception," Patricia said quietly. "Mom, you can check the dates on those searches. They were after I found out I was pregnant, not before." The investigator says it's easy to manipulate internet search histories to change dates. "So now I'm a computer hacker too, along with being a pathological liar, a medical fraud conspirator, and mentally unstable?" "There's more," Patricia continued, her voice strained. "They found evidence that you've been purchasing hormone supplements from online pharmacies, supplements that could trigger false positive pregnancy tests." "That's impossible! I've never purchased anything like that." The credit card records show purchases from 3 different online pharmaceutical companies over the past 6 months. Cassandra sat down hard, her mind racing. "Someone is using my credit card information. This is identity theft, fraud." "Or it's evidence of a very elaborate deception," Patricia said quietly. "Mom, do you hear yourself? You're suggesting that I spent months planning to fake a pregnancy, researching symptoms, purchasing illegal hormones, manipulating internet records, and conspiring with James to create false medical documentation, all so that I could, steal attention from Victoria's wedding?" "I don't know what to think anymore," Patricia admitted. "The evidence is overwhelming, Cassandra. And it's not just Victoria presenting it. The investigators, the medical experts, even your own colleagues are raising concerns." "My colleagues are raising concerns because someone has been systematically feeding them false information designed to make me look unstable." "Who would do something like that?" Victoria! This is exactly what she's been doing since the wedding. She's building a case against me piece by piece, turning everyone I trust against me, destroying my credibility so thoroughly that even my own mother won't believe me. The silence on the other end of the line stretched for a long moment. Your father and I think you should consider getting psychiatric help. If you're having some kind of breakdown, if the stress of your job and the family situation has triggered something. I'm not having a breakdown, Cassandra shouted, then immediately regretted it because it only reinforced the narrative that she was unstable. I'm being systematically destroyed by someone who planned this attack from the beginning. Cassandra, honey, listen to yourself. You're suggesting that Victoria has orchestrated an elaborate conspiracy involving multiple private investigators, computer hackers, credit card fraud, and dozens of people from different parts of your life? That level of coordination would require resources and connections that Victoria simply doesn't have. But as Patricia spoke, Cassandra realized something that made her blood run cold. Victoria didn't have those resources and connections, but Brandon did. Brandon Whitfield, heir to a Memphis real estate empire with family money and business connections that could absolutely fund and coordinate this kind of comprehensive character assassination. Mom, I have to go. Cassandra, please don't hang up. We want to help you, but you have to be willing to accept that you might need professional... Cassandra ended the call and immediately began searching online for information about Brandon Whitfield and his family's business empire. What she found made everything click into place with horrifying clarity. Whitfield Enterprises wasn't just a real estate company. They were a conglomerate with subsidiaries in private security, digital forensics, and reputation management. They had the resources to conduct sophisticated surveillance operations, manipulate digital records, and coordinate multi-pronged character assassination campaigns. Victoria hadn't been acting alone. She'd married into a family with the wealth and connections to destroy anyone who threatened their interests. And somehow, Cassandra's mere existence as the difficult sister had been perceived as exactly that kind of threat. Her phone buzzed with another text from the unknown number. They're going to try to have you committed. The papers are already being prepared. You have maybe 48 hours to prove your case or disappear. This time, the message included a phone number and a name. Call Sarah Chen. She has information Victoria doesn't know about. Cassandra stared at the text, realizing that she was completely alone in a battle against enemies with unlimited resources and no moral boundaries. Her job was gone, James's career was in ruins, her family believed she was mentally ill, and her best friend thought she was having a breakdown. But someone was still fighting for her. Someone knew the truth and was trying to help her prove it before Victoria and the Whitfield family succeeded in having her declared mentally incompetent. As she dialed Dr. Chen's number, Cassandra realized that the next 48 hours would determine whether she would emerge from this nightmare vindicated or spend the rest of her life branded as the unstable sister who had fabricated an elaborate pregnancy hoax. The phone rang once. Twice. 3 times, and Cassandra held her breath, praying that Dr. Chen would have the answers she desperately needed to save not just her reputation, but her freedom.
Dr. Sarah Chen answered on the 4th ring, her voice cautious but determined. Cassandra, I've been waiting for your call. We need to meet immediately. There are things about your case that Victoria and her people don't know about, things that will change everything. They met at Dr. Chen's office after hours, the medical building dark except for the single light in her consultation room. Dr. Chen had spread several files across her desk, her usually calm demeanor replaced by barely contained anger. Before we begin, Dr. Chen said, you should know that I've been contacted by investigators claiming to represent your family. They wanted copies of your medical records, access to our original test samples, everything. Did you give them anything? I gave them nothing. Patient confidentiality laws exist for a reason. But their questions made me suspicious, so I did some investigating of my own. She opened the first file. What I found is going to destroy your sister's credibility forever. Dr. Chen pulled out a series of medical forms and lab reports.
When I run pregnancy confirmations, I always order comprehensive blood work, not just pregnancy hormones, but full metabolic panels, genetic markers, everything needed for proper prenatal care. Okay. One of those tests is a genetic screening that establishes not just that you're pregnant, but provides DNA markers for the fetus. It's standard procedure, though most patients don't realize how detailed the information is. Cassandra's heart began to race. What did you find? I found that your baby has a very rare genetic marker, a benign mutation that occurs in less than 0.2% of the population. It's completely harmless, but it's distinctive. Dr. Chen opened another file. Yesterday, I received a call from a colleague at Memphis General Hospital, Dr. Jennifer Walsh. She was calling because she'd seen some very unusual test results that reminded her of your case. What kind of test results? Brandon Whitfield came in 3 days ago requesting comprehensive genetic testing. He claimed he wanted to establish baseline health information before he and Victoria started trying to have children. Cassandra felt something electric in the air, a sense that everything was about to change. Dr. Walsh ran the full panel, and Brandon Whitfield has that same rare genetic marker, the one your baby has. The words hit Cassandra like a physical blow. That's impossible. James is the father. That's what I thought too. So I had Dr. Walsh run the test again, and then I had our lab run additional tests on your original samples. The results are identical. Your baby has a genetic marker that could only come from Brandon Whitfield. Cassandra's mind reeled as the implications sank in. You're saying Brandon is the father of my baby? I'm saying the genetic evidence strongly suggests that possibility. But here's what makes this even more interesting. I pulled the dates of Victoria's bachelorette party weekend. Dr. Chen handed her a calendar. Your estimated conception date was July 20th, give or take a few days. Victoria's bachelorette party was July 18th through 20th in Gatlinburg. You were there as maid of honor. Suddenly, fragments of memory began flooding back. The cabin in Gatlinburg, the heavy drinking that Cassandra had avoided because she was working a double shift the next day, the party games and confusion in the dark cabin, Brandon showing up unexpectedly on Saturday night because he missed Victoria too much. Oh my God, Cassandra whispered. Saturday night at the cabin, I went to bed early because I wasn't feeling well. I woke up in the middle of the night and thought James had come to surprise me, but it was dark and I was groggy. It wasn't James, Dr. Chen said gently. It was Brandon, and he knew what happened, knew there was a chance the baby was his, and he let Victoria destroy me rather than admit what he had done. Dr. Chen nodded grimly, and when Victoria started questioning your pregnancy, he saw an opportunity to eliminate the problem permanently. If you were declared mentally unstable, if your credibility was destroyed completely, no one would ever believe you if you figured out the truth about paternity. Cassandra's phone rang. James's name appeared on the screen. Cassie, you need to get somewhere safe right now, he said without preamble. I just got a call from a friend at the courthouse. Commitment papers have been filed. They're sending officers to take you for psychiatric evaluation within the hour. I'm at Dr. Chen's office. James, we know the truth now. We know everything. What are you talking about? Brandon is the father of my baby. The genetic testing proves it. He assaulted me during Victoria's bachelorette party, and when I got pregnant, he orchestrated this entire campaign to destroy my credibility so I could never expose what he did. The silence on the other end of the line stretched for several seconds. Jesus Christ, James said finally. That's why the character assassination was so sophisticated. He wasn't just protecting his marriage, he was covering up a sexual assault. Dr. Chen was already making copies of all the genetic testing documentation. I'm calling Dr. Walsh right now to get Brandon's test results officially documented. This evidence will hold up in any court. Cassandra's phone buzzed with another text from her anonymous supporter. Police on their way to your apartment. They have commitment papers and a warrant. Get somewhere public with witnesses. Bring proof. We need to go public with this immediately, Cassandra said, before they can have me committed and discredited.
Dr. Chen grabbed her car keys.
I know someone at Channel 4 News, investigative reporter who specializes in medical fraud and family court corruption. If we can get to her tonight, get this story on the morning news. They drove through Nashville's downtown, Dr. Chen making urgent phone calls while Cassandra held the genetic testing results that would change everything. The reporter, Sandra Martinez, agreed to meet them at the television station despite the late hour. "This is explosive," Sandra said after reviewing the documentation. "Genetic evidence of paternity, medical records proving the assault victim was telling the truth, evidence of a coordinated character assassination campaign by the perpetrator's family? This is going to be front-page news." "Can you get it on the air before morning?" Cassandra asked urgently. "I can get it on the midnight news update and repeat it every hour until dawn. By the time Nashville wakes up tomorrow, everyone will know the truth." As Sandra prepared her report, Cassandra called her parents one last time. "Cassandra, where are you?" Patricia answered frantically. "The police are looking for you. We're trying to help you get the treatment you need." "Mom, turn on Channel 4 News in 10 minutes. Watch the story about Brandon Whitfield and genetic evidence of sexual assault. Then call me back and tell me if you still think I need psychiatric treatment." The news story aired at 11:47 p.m., and by midnight, Cassandra's phone was ringing nonstop. Her parents, hospital administrators, colleagues who had doubted her, friends who had distanced themselves, everyone calling to apologize, to express shock, to ask how they could help. Victoria called at 12:15 a.m., her voice shaking with rage and fear. "You can't prove anything. Brandon was never alone with you. There were witnesses." "Victoria, the genetic testing is conclusive. Brandon is the father of my baby. He assaulted me during your bachelorette party, and when I got pregnant, you two decided to destroy my life rather than face the consequences." "That's not what happened. You're lying, just like you've always lied." "The whole city knows the truth now. The police are probably already at your house with a warrant for Brandon's arrest. You have two choices: admit what happened and cooperate with the investigation, or go down with him." The line went quiet for a long moment. "I didn't know," Victoria said finally, her voice barely a whisper. "I swear to you, Cassie, I didn't know what he'd done. I thought you were lying about the pregnancy, trying to ruin my wedding. I had no idea. But when you found out the truth, you chose to protect him instead of me. I chose to protect my marriage, my future. I couldn't let—" Victoria stopped, realizing what she was admitting. "You chose to let him destroy me rather than face the scandal of marrying a rapist." The conversation ended with Victoria sobbing and Brandon's voice in the background shouting about lawyers and damage control. 3 months later, Cassandra stood in a Nashville courtroom as Brandon Whitfield was sentenced to 8 years in prison for sexual assault and conspiracy to commit fraud. Victoria, who had cooperated with prosecutors in exchange for immunity, filed for divorce and left Nashville permanently. The hospital reinstated both Cassandra and James with full apologies and compensation for the emotional distress they had suffered. The private investigators who had fabricated evidence were facing criminal charges, and the Whitfield family's reputation management company was under federal investigation. But the most important vindication came on a warm spring morning when Cassandra gave birth to a healthy baby girl. DNA testing confirmed what Dr. Chen's genetic screening had revealed. Brandon was indeed the biological father. But James, who had stood by Cassandra through everything, legally adopted the baby and became her father in every way that mattered. Patricia and Richard, devastated by their failure to support their daughter, spent months rebuilding their relationship with Cassandra through family therapy and genuine efforts to understand how their priorities had been so misguided. "I almost lost everything," Cassandra told the therapist during one session. "My job, my relationship, my family, my freedom. But I also discovered who I really was when everything was stripped away. I learned that I'm stronger than I ever imagined." As she held her daughter in the hospital room, surrounded by James, her parents, Maya, and Dr. Chen, the people who had ultimately stood by her, Cassandra reflected on how the worst betrayal of her life had led to the most important truth: that real family isn't determined by blood or social obligations, but by who chooses to believe in you when the whole world is telling you you're wrong. Victoria's wedding day attack had been meant to destroy her. Instead, it had revealed the strength she never knew she possessed and brought the right people into her life while removing the wrong ones. The anonymous text messages, she later learned, had come from Brandon's former assistant, who had witnessed his planning sessions with private investigators and felt compelled to help the victim she saw being systematically destroyed. After the trial, Cassandra received one final message from Victoria. "I'm sorry for everything. I hope someday you can forgive me. Congratulations on your beautiful daughter." Cassandra never responded. Some betrayals cut too deep for forgiveness, and some people forfeit the right to redemption through their choices. But as she watched James feeding their daughter and felt the warmth of the family they'd built together, she realized that forgiveness wasn't necessary for happiness. The truth had been enough. The truth and the courage to keep fighting for it, no matter how many people told her she was wrong, had given her everything she needed to build a life far better than anything Victoria had tried to destroy.
Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.